This was the departure Julian Assange had feared, a humiliating end to a near 7-year stay in the embassy until the Ecuadorian government revoked his right to asylum. And British police moved in to take him into custody. On Thursday afternoon, a British court found Assange guilty of skipping bail in 2012. His lawyer said that he would fight a US request for his extradition.
I've just been with Mr. Assange in the police cells. He wants to thank all of his supporters for their ongoing support, and he said, "I told you so."
The Ecuadorian government said the Wlkileaks founder had breached the terms of his stay and had attempted to destabilize foreign governments. Supporters of Assange said that he became a scapegoat for the US government after Wlkileaks published footage of US soldiers killing civilians in Iraq by the whistleblower Chelsea Manning. The US maintained that the hacked documents published by the anti-secrecy site posed a grave security risk. The detention of Assange, nevertheless, remains a contentious issue. Whistleblower Edward Snowden, who exposed the extent to which the US was spying on its own citizens, reminded that the United Nations formally ruled his detention to be arbitrary, a violation of human rights. Assange clearly remains a divisive figure, and investigations into the part Wlkileaks played in the 2016 US elections by publishing emails hacked from the Democratic Party have only intensified the pressure around him. If indicted, Assange could be taken to the US to face charges.
Well, I think that the US government has been trying its best to pursue Julian Assange without setting a precedent that means that we could all get arrested if we publish something, if we report on something that the US government doesn't like because they say it's secret, even if it's in the public interest. Now, all of this stems from that leak in 2010 by Chelsea Manning, including various elements that we use extensively here on Al Jazeera, including that famous video of a US helicopter pilot shooting various Iraqis, including Reuters journalists, in Iraq. There were tens of thousands of documents leaked by Chelsea Manning, which showed evidence of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, diplomatic contraventions of the law by US State Department officials, and it goes on and on. We use this database constantly. So if and this is what the Obama presidency tried to do, if you prosecute someone for publishing that information, well, that means we're all culpable. That means you can arrest someone from the New York Times for this kind of thing. So this is what the Donald Trump Department of Justice has come up with. They're only charging him with one count of hacking, which has a maximum sentence of up to 5 years. They allege that at a point in 2010, Chelsea Manning said to Julian Assange, look, this is about all the information I have to give you. And Julian Assange replied with this: curious eyes never run dry in my experience. So encouraging Chelsea Manning to leak more information. Then the indictment says that also in March, Manning provided Assange with part of a password for a Department of Defense computer. And this is what everything hinges on, these 4 words. And sometime in March, Assange told Manning, according to the DOJ, that he had had no luck so far in trying to crack that password. That's it, those 4 words. So, and also it alleges, as part of the manners and means of the conspiracy, that Julian Assange actively tried to protect and conceal the source, Chelsea Manning, from public exposure, which is what any journalist would do. So it's relatively thin stuff, especially when we think about the precedents for journalists, the press and their sources, the protection of sources, the encouragement of sources to give up information that may have enormous public interest, like the prosecution of war crimes. The other point of this is, though, that if Assange is extradited to the US, there's nothing stopping the US government from then continuing to file charges against Assange, which would have even more precedents for that whole concept of a government prosecuting a journalist or a publisher for publishing something that a government doesn't like. This would suggest that any government could do that to any journalist around the world.
Shihab, thanks very much. Let's bring in Renata Avia. She's a human rights and technology lawyer. She's collaborated in the legal case with Julian Assange over the past 10 years. She joins us on Skype from Belgrade. Renata Avia, what does Julian Assange do now?
Well, what do the lawyers do now? I mean, for him, my principal concern now is that he has been denied proper health care for 7 years. And now he is in the hands of the authorities who denied that proper health care for 7 years. If you see on how the events unfold today, it was for me not human treatment, the way that he was pushed out of the embassy and immediately forced to face court, a person that hasn't been outside for 7 years, that hasn't received urgent medical treatment, that has to deal with an immense pressure and a diagnosed post-traumatic stress diagnosed by his doctors.
Okay, just let me interrupt for a second. When you talk about his health care and his health situation, presumably he is aware of his own health and the Ecuadorian authorities inside the embassy are aware of whether he's got good health or not. But he wasn't detained in the embassy. He wasn't chained to a radiator. It was his choice to go into that building, and it was his choice to stay there for 7 years, and it was his choice to leave this morning. And he must have known, because he does court controversy, that's part of his MO, if you will, he must have known that when he walked out the building, there would be a scrum of policemen and women, there would be a scrum of the world's media.
Number one, it was not a choice, it was the exercise of a human right, the right to seek asylum. And he was granted that right. And that right, once it's granted, it has obligations for the country granting that attached. It is a human right to seek asylum, to be granted asylum, and to enjoy the asylum.
That's not quite what I was saying, and I'm sure you're aware of that. What I was saying was, yes, he had the right to claim asylum, but it was his choice to claim asylum. It was his choice to walk through the front door of the embassy.
Right. Yes, sure, to exercise a right and get inside the embassy and seek diplomatic protection. Today, what happened today, he was expelled from the embassy, forced out from the embassy, and not walking out from the embassy as you described it.
Okay, very briefly. Very briefly,
yes.
Otherwise you're going to be reading the headlines in 2 minutes. But if he is extradited, will we see someone in a court, either in the United States or back in the UK, who is not, according to the court today, who is not a narcissist and a self-publicist?
Well, that statement was a serious violation of the fairness that any judge should keep on any procedure. And what I fear is that it will be there's no chance of fair trial either in the UK or in the US right now under these circumstances. It has been a political case, a political persecution with lots of irregularities through the phases, missing documents, longer terms when the terms should be shorter, shorter when they should be longer, constant non-disclosure of freedom of information requests, constant denial of things that are regularly granted. And so what can we expect from the UK justice and from the US justice? What I fear the most is that this case right now in the UK is the perfect distraction from Theresa May's mess with the Brexit. And the timing of the case makes me very suspicious of this. And also the way that media is treating the case makes me wonder why he is not described as he is journalist, and why the angle of the bad hacker, the person misbehaving is being pushed by the media. This is a very serious case of freedom of expression and should be treated as such. We must leave our conversation there. Renata Avia in Belgrade, thank you so much. You're welcome.